I just played 3 hours of Doom: The Dark Ages, so let's rip and tear through what I saw.
That was a little cheesy.
That was a little cheesy.
All right.
We'll go with the first one. So first up, the thing that everyone probably cares most about with Doom is its story. It's there. There's more of it. There's cutscenes, there's characters, there's stuff going on. I don't care. I'm sorry, I don't. There's more lore, which is cool, and I'm sure people who are fans are gonna be stoked, but like, I'm not there for the story. I talked to Hugo Marty Stratton. They referenced a lot of action movies. They said they were trying to create a pace to the story that pulls the player through the game.
Roadhouse was actually a big source of inspiration, as were all of the great 80s, 90s action films. We really just focused and did a deep dive on the action genre, to make sure that like the pace of the game, the scale, like the narrative, it really properly supports, the gameplay.
I only saw, 3 or 4 cutscenes probably, so I really don't know what's happening in the story other than that the Doom guy shows up on this medieval realm, this medieval themed realm, and he's ready to kill demons. That's about as much story as I need for a Doom, but given the cutscenes and how elaborate they were, it seems like they're trying to build more story here. There's proper villains, there's different characters, there's different parts of the world that are being shown. But the thing that I want to talk about, and the thing that probably a lot of people want to hear about, is the combat. When this game was announced, a big tagline for it was "Stand and Fight." That sounds cool. That sounds badass, you're scoring up against a demon. However, I think I went in with a little bit of caution, I would say, because I think one of the reasons why Doom 2016, Doom Eternal, and honestly like old Doom games, the reason why they're so much fun is because of that movement, because of that, like, it almost feels like you're on ice, you're like sliding around the map.
What about Doom 3?
Well, Doom 3 is a different story. That's, survival horror-ish, right?
I should make another one of those.
Yeah.
And, Flashlight, bring it back to when it was first released, when you gotta put your gun away.
Yeah.
Flashlight.
Maybe the next Doom will be that. Will be a spiritual successor to Doom 3. With Doom: The Dark Ages, it is still very fast-paced. You're still moving around the battlefield quickly. It's not a cover shooter, obviously. You are still moving constantly. You're dodging bullets. That sort of bullet hell feel that you see in later areas of Doom Eternal and Doom 2016 is still there. Lots of movement. However, there are certain enemies that you can more efficiently kill if you square them down. You look them down, you walk up to them, and you just start using your shield to deflect attacks and then follow up with melee attacks.
What do you say to them when you're if you're staring down the barrel of a bad guy?
I say, I'm gonna rip and tear your nuts. But when you challenge these demons, there's still stuff going on around you. However, this is when your shield comes into play. There is parrying mechanics. There's a blocking mechanic, which, to be fair, I rarely blocked. It's kind of weird. It slows you down. It seems a little inefficient in a Doom, but there are certain instances, mostly environmental instances, where I would hold the shield up to block. But when you're fighting these demons that require you to kind of get up front and deflect attacks, there's a good back and forth there, because unlike the chainsaw, which had gas that you had to collect in order to chainsaw through demons, you only get 3 charges of your melee attacks, or your melee weapon. So whether using the flail or the power gauntlet, you only have 3 powerful attacks with that, and then you default to just a standard melee attack. However, if you perfectly time a parry, then you get a charge back. So the idea here is you fight one of these melee demons, you square up with it, you deflect, you return, you deflect, you return. And that's sort of the loop for these demons. But at least based on what I played, this doesn't happen very often. It's kind of like other Doom games where you'd see a specific demon, you'd use a specific weapon on that because you know that would kill that demon easily or more easily. With this, I kind of got the same vibe, where it's you see a tyrant, you walk up to that tyrant, and then you fight it that way. When it's dead, and then you're zipping around the battlefield again. The shield does have other uses though. It's not just for combat, it's also kind of for traversal. You can use it for puzzles, but I think my favorite use of it is the shield dash, which you can kind of lock onto an enemy and attack, and you zip through the battlefield and then you can attack a demon in front of you. It feels like Doom the Dark Ages meat hook in a way, except it's easier to use because it's not attached to one weapon. You always have your shield with you. And you're not really fighting against inertia here. So when you see a demon you want to attack, you lock on, you zip over to him, and then you start fighting him. There's no, I don't know, Spider-Man web slinging sort of effect where you like hook onto something and then you kind of like swing around. It is very direct. It's also less vertical too. So you can target a demon above you and you can dash up to him, but you can't like target a demon straight up and swing up there or anything. So I guess with the shield saw in the mix, Doom the Dark Ages might feel a little different at first. There's new mechanics you kind of have to wrap your head around. There's different strategies that you'll need to follow. But at the end of the day, it still feels like a Doom game. It's fast, it's gory. The weapons, like most of your combat is going to be with your firearms. And there are a ton of pretty dope firearms. They've really leaned into the medieval Gothic aesthetic here. One of the weapons I used a lot was the Skull Crusher, which grinds up skulls and then fires out skull bits on a horizontal plane. Super good for close range. It doesn't quite feel like a shotgun. It's something different. It's fully automatic, but I found that fairly useful. There's also a weapon that I don't think they've showed off that I got to test out in this preview, and that was the chain shot. Essentially, this thing has a cannonball attached to a chain and it fires it out and retracts after you hit an enemy. But basically, this thing just knocks down demons at close range. It's pretty cool, feels good. It's got some good sound effects, some good like bone crunching with each hit. The one weird thing though is that it still has ammo, which is weird because you'd think it wouldn't need it, but I guess, you know, game balance, you can't just be using that the entire time. And
I'm sure that the Doom lore,
there's some reason.
Really deep lore.
It probably explains it in a cutscene that I'm gonna skip when it comes out. The final level I played in the demo was something called Siege, and here there was, I think, 3 or 4 objectives that I could complete in any order. It was a giant battlefield that I was sort of able to explore. It kind of reminded me of like Gears 5. You know how Gears 5 added open areas? Like you still play through your linear Gears of War levels, and then all of a sudden you get to an open area. That's kind of how it felt. Maybe not that big. There's no vehicles, at least based on what I played. There's no vehicles in those sections that you're going through. But these areas were kind of cool because they offered a more freeform approach to combat. I would see a group of enemies really far away and be like, I'm gonna go mess them up. And then I'd head over there and I'd try out different weapons, die, reload, try out different weapons. And there was some cool like objectives and mechanics within there that seemed optional, but it seemed like doing them was usually worth your time, whether that be collectibles, weapon upgrades, Doom stuff. And lastly, for the first time in the modern Doom series, they have added some vehicles. The Atlan, which is a giant mech, and a dragon you can ride. Both of these vehicles, for lack of a better term, they rely heavily on a dodge mechanic. So essentially when you see a green attack heading towards the Atlan or the dragon, you dodge. If you dodge at the right time, time slows and you can do a counter attack. I thought the Atlan felt really good. I'm not a big mech guy. I don't really like piloting mechs in games, but the Atlan felt big and chunky and all of its attacks had a lot of weight. And you know, there's something cool about squaring up against some demons that were like final bosses in older Doom games, and you're just kind of punching them so hard that like flesh and bone is flying off, and it looks cool, it feels good. It's very simple in a way that I think is good because it felt like a nice change of pace. That said, there's also the dragon stuff, and it works in a similar way. You're trying to dodge green attacks, you're countering, but it's also, you know, 3-axis. You're moving across the X, the Y, and the Z axis. And that felt a little weird to me. It felt a little too floaty. You'd be flying really fast through a tunnel and all of a sudden you'd see an enemy, you lock on and then you'd stop. And then you'd have this sort of limited range of motion while you dealt with that enemy. And it felt a little strange. According to the developers, that's one of the things that they're still fine-tuning before launch. And they still have, you know, about a month and a half, 2 months before that game comes out. So maybe that's something that can get worked out in the next couple weeks. But based on what I played, I think the weakest link of everything I saw was probably the dragon combat. Now that said, the level I did get to do on the back of the dragon was pretty cool because you basically flew over a giant city and there were 4 helicarriers that you had to destroy. But in order to destroy them, you had to board them. So basically you had to disable all the guns and then you could land on it and then you destroy it from the inside, like in Star Wars Battlefront 2. If anyone gets that, you know, the space battles, that's what I'm talking about. The space battles where you'd fly inside and destroy it from the inside. Kind of felt like that. But the level design was a bit more winding than that. So a lot of times you'd blow up the helicarrier and then you'd jump off that and you'd be in the city for a bit and you'd be shooting and killing demons. And then every single time it would end with you jumping off a cliff and then your dragon would come and pick you up. It was epic, it was grand, and I think that's kind of one of the things that Hugo Martin and Marty Stratton kind of wanted to impart upon the people playing it, was that given the fantasy setting, they really wanted to lean into that in a way that they felt you kind of need to when you're doing fantasy, right? You think of fantasy, you think of Lord of the Rings, you think of The Witcher, I don't know, other fantasy stuff.
You don't know any fantasy things, do you?
I know, that's the only thing I can think of.
When you think of fantasy, you think of...
2 things.
2 things.
Lord of the Rings and The Witcher.
And now Doom.
When you think fantasy, you think Lord of the Rings, you think huge. You know, I think there's a grandness to fantasy and epicness that people expect. So it was important. It was fun, actually, putting that in Doom.
But I kind of get it. Like, it feels grand, it feels epic, and that is kind of one thing that both the Atland and the Dragon writing kind of add to it. Like, you're getting huge vistas of this giant world, and in that regard, it seems cool. And I think, while I'm not super excited for the story, I am excited to see how they use that setting in cool ways. And of course, I'm excited to kill demons.
Does Doom guy have sex in this one?
Yes. Every cutscene he has sex.
Great.